Good evening, friends. Thank you all for coming here. My name is Emilio Dottore. I'm the Executive Director of the Milwaukee Turners from Turner Hall. We are proud to be community partners, and we're very glad that you have all joined us this Tuesday evening to learn more about Round 3 of the Zero Youth Corrections Grant. I'd like to begin by first thanking the Wisconsin Black Historical Society and Claiborne Benson and Jamila. It is no small coincidence that we're here. This is an important, significant cultural site. This is elevating and celebrating vital, important history. It is a sacred space. Additionally, I'd like to thank Catalyze Justice and Vincent, who's here, who flew in to also offer us some support. I'd like to thank our friends who provided the food back there, and please feel free to get up and get the food, some of the housekeeping details. Also, shout out to the abolitionist task group that made and baked and gave us the cupcakes that are there for you. They're good, I ate one. For those who need it, restrooms are through those back doors and to the right. And we'll jump in. You can feel free to move around as we cover a lot of this important information. It was more than just historic when the county declared racism a public health crisis. Milwaukee, faced by the gross disparities in youth incarceration, the profound inequities, specifically affecting black men and boys and Native men and boys, the significant ripple effect on young people and their families and their health outcomes when they are incarcerated is just one of many reasons that the Milwaukee Turners are proud to be partners in this collaboration with Milwaukee County and the Public Welfare Foundation and the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, so that we can work together to collectively identify solutions to begin addressing this and hopefully elevate a model for others. So I can talk for hours and hours, especially after a couple of cups of espresso, but it is my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend David Muhammad.
Thank you, Emilio. Good evening. My name is David Muhammad. I'm Deputy Director of the Department of Health and Human Services at Milwaukee County. DHHS is Milwaukee County's largest department that oversees our behavioral health, our homelessness and housing outreach, our older adult services and disability services, and children, youth, and family services, which our administrator of CYFS, Kelly Pethke, is here in the front row with us tonight. One of the reasons that we've engaged in this project for the last 3 rounds is because of the significance and the importance of what it means and represents to have zero youth corrections. The title is aspirational. We know that there's a criminal legal system. We know that there's a carceral system. We know that there are perverse incentives when it comes to locking up young people and adults in the state of Wisconsin, and we know how significant that is. At DHHS, we know that young people should not be scarred for the rest of their lives because of a mistake, that there is an ability to make change for redemptive change as well as corrective behavior, but the greatest thing that needs correcting is the way that the system functions. And as a system partner, the ability to be self-reflective and be held accountable by a community partner like the Milwaukee Turners is one of the reasons that we engaged in this project. It is not an accident, the dollar amount that we first started giving out, which was $400,000. At that time, Mark Mertens was the administrator at CYFS, and it was costing because the state had raised the cost of daily correction fees for a young person in corrections to $400,000 a year, about $1,200 a day. And now we're facing something similar with the state budget where that is doubling again, and it's going to cost upwards of $2,000 a day and about $800,000 a year annually. So while we saw this as an opportunity to make a statement and invest in grassroots organizations and young people who were willing to work with community partners, both as a preventative measure and as a form of, I guess, youth-focused reentry. This is significant for us because regardless of people always want to know about the impact and how did you know what you did worked and whatnot. And nobody ever asked the same question of failing systems like prisons or the criminal legal system or all of the things that people are encountering. Nobody ever says, where is the correction in corrections? But those questions are asked when you try and do something that reflects the whole person. And so this is both an effort to invest in grassroots organizations, to build capacity for people with commitment to the work, and at the same time, work with system partners. I see Judge Shelton here, I see other folks from the courts here, and other partners here representing that who know and recognize that we can do something different, but it has to be done in communication and coordination with community partners, and we have to democratize that. And so that is what this represents. It was an attempt at participatory budgeting to the best that we could do with some of the parameters, but we know that better can be done. And so we thank you for being a part of this journey with us. To take us further into tonight's program and an outline for the funding opportunity, I want to bring up Chrissy Fung.
Thank you, David and Emilio. Hi, I'm Chrissy Fung. My pronouns are she, they. I am the Associate Director at the Milwaukee Turners and the Project Manager at the Milwaukee Turners for our Zero Youth Corrections work here. So I'm just going to go briefly into an outline of what we'll be talking about this evening. And I appreciate the context that Emilio and David have set. I think that this is a really unique partnership in that we have Milwaukee County working together with a private foundation, the Public Welfare Foundation, working together with a community partner, the Milwaukee Turners. And that trust amongst those entities and the individuals that work in those entities, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is so important. But I think that seeing how many of you have shown up here today also shows a really important piece of this, which is trust in the community, all of you, the folks who are, whether you're system partners, whether you're working in direct service, whether you're already advocating for systems change. We have our grantees here tonight. We have folks who have applied and are hoping to continue to be a part of this community working on youth justice in Milwaukee. And so it's very meaningful for me today to look out and see how many folks I know and some folks I don't know. And I'm really excited for us to all get started on the next chapter of working towards zero youth corrections in Milwaukee. So with that, we're going to be covering a brief historical look back at ZYC Rounds 1 and 2, understanding how we got here, and then focusing on Round 3, which is the really juicy stuff, and talking about some key changes in Round 3. And then we'll also prelude a little bit the concept of the community table that we'll be announcing, which is a really exciting part of this new chapter. And I think that, I hope that a lot of you will be interested in that and will commit to sitting down and forming a collaborative so that we can work in coalition towards true change that is transformational for our young people. And then lastly, we will have plenty of time for questions, reactions, and other thoughts. So feel free to write your questions down, hopefully, and hold them till the end, even though I know they may be burning. It's definitely our goal to inform, but also inspire a dialogue with those of you in the room. As folks who are part of the community, I think that it is the community's role to be, as David said, aspirational, to be imaginative, to be risk-taking, and to be bold when we're thinking about the work that we can do here. So as much as many of us may have come from day jobs or perhaps unpaid day work that you're doing to advocate for young people in this community, I'm hoping that tonight we can kind of take off the restrictive feelings that we all have about what we think the rules have to be and the way the system is set up now, and kind of try to shake a little bit of that off and think imaginatively together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my very tall friend from the Public Welfare Foundation, Jed.
Thank you, Chrissy. I'm not going to add anything different that hasn't already been said. or I won't reiterate anything that's already been said at this point, but I'm Jed. I'm a program director with the Public Welfare Foundation. We are a national foundation based in DC, and we do work in 10 jurisdictions around the country. We've been doing funding work in Milwaukee County for a little bit more than 5 years now. And I could talk more about that later, but what we saw when we wanted to get involved in Milwaukee and into the Zero Youth Corrections work, this core work of these three partners, was really thinking about how do we shift both the narrative about what's possible around youth justice and decarcerating young people from our systems, but also here's a unique partnership that doesn't happen in a lot of places where private philanthropy, government, and an abolitionist organization, a very astute abolitionist organization, come together to work on these very difficult issues that we're all trying to face in order to keep our young people and our families safe and not reliant on punitive carceral systems. And so when we started having conversations with folks in Milwaukee, we thought this was a great possibility to really imagine what's possible. One of the things that, for anybody who's dealt with philanthropy, you're asking for more resources. The way we often see it is that we are a drop in the bucket. The only thing that we could do as a private foundation is really catalyze opportunities, because the big bucket really is government dollars, right? That's where we kind of really can see the impact of large-scale investments, of really transformative work, if we both bring the accountability as community and push folks into imagining different things. So we really like to believe that we are funding imaginations in order to change systems, and that's never more true than here in Milwaukee. So with that, to talk a little bit about the Zero Youth Corrections mission, as David mentioned earlier, our ambition is in the title. We are working to try to get zero young people incarcerated from Milwaukee. So we want to reduce the reliance on youth punishment and detention and invest in community-driven supports and services for young people. So building a continuum of care that will hopefully lead to young people never having to spend a night in a carceral setting. And so, like I said before, and has been mentioned before, Zero Youth Corrections is our ultimate goal. And this is generational work. It's not going to be done with one grant to one entity or two grants to two entities. This is generational work that we are hoping to be able to fund sustainable change work within. With that overview of the mission, I will turn it over to my fabulous colleague from CYFS, Danique.
Thank you, Jed, and good evening, everybody. My name is Danique Seymour, and I am one of two program supervisors at Children, Youth, and Family Services, which is part of DHHS. So basically, we wanted to do something different. I guess I'm supposed to do my own movement, okay. Basically, we want to do something different when we started this project. We started a couple years ago, and we had a lot of great ideas. First, we wanted to, I'm going to switch it around a little bit because of what's on here is kind of mixed together. But we had an idea, as was alluded to by Director Muhammad, about Deputy Director Muhammad, about participatory budgeting. That means we needed you all to weigh in and help us figure out what's going on and find solutions. And so that was a huge part of what we started with, and it was an undertaking. And some of you guys may have been part of that from the beginning, from round one. But that was huge. It is not a simple thing to get everybody in the county to weigh in on a decision. It's pretty almost impossible. But I want to say it was a lesson that we learned. And what we learned is that we have to continue to ask those harder questions. We got to continue to think bigger. And we have to continue to work together to collaborate to figure out solutions, as Jed said, that are long term. What we wanted to do with that idea is create access to funding that typical people don't get. A lot of times when you hear about funding opportunities, we know that our bigger agencies are able to get it because they have the manpower, they have the experience, and they have the skills to go for those grants. A lot of times our smaller agencies don't have that. They don't have that experience behind them, and they don't have a team full of people that can sit down and write the grants and then rewrite the grants and perfect them in order to get those funds. But with this opportunity, We changed that narrative. We made it so that it didn't matter if you've never been funded, it didn't matter if you were never funded by a government entity or government funding, or that you had before. We wanted to give everybody an equal playing field, an equal chance in order to get access to this funds to do what they believed was something amazing and beneficial to our kids. And with that, we were able to do that. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but with our first round of funding, we were able to award through a selection process, evaluation selection process, we were able to award 2 agencies that have never been funded by government funds before. That's huge. That does not typically happen. That means we're giving people a different opportunity to do something different, having their ideas at the forefront, really listening. And not only that, having groups, our advisory board, review folks, and having that be an educational moment was huge too. So not only are you giving opportunity for people who have never had that type of funding, get that funding, you're also educating the community on what it means to go through the application process. That means we're removing that red tape. We're helping more people in the community know what it means to go after funding. That's not typical. That doesn't always happen. And that's something we've been very proud of since the beginning, because we always want to make sure that we're educating the community when we're doing this, and we want to give everybody an opportunity. And within that, we had some amazing applications that have come through over the last 2 rounds, different innovative ideas, and this is what we've been promoting from the beginning. Do not stick to the status quo of what we talked about before. Corrections not really working. How do we think outside of the box? Do something different. It's okay if you've never heard it before, because guess what? That's what gets people's heads to start spinning and like, I like that idea. That's different. We don't want to just lock up a child, because what does that do? At the end of the day, they are still children. They are somebody's baby. And everybody in this room has made a mistake. Nobody in this room can say that they've never done something wrong. And everybody has gotten a second chance. That's why we're all here today. And so we have to start thinking the same way for our kids and changing the narrative of the types of services and programs that we provide. And with all of this, we've been able to do so many more things by aligning our partnerships. We've been able to see so many expansions, even amongst the folks that have been able to receive funding for these grant opportunities, coming together, creating partnerships that weren't there before, creating central hubs within the community that were not there before, continuing to build on and create a legacy that's going to help our kids in the community. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're doing it that way, because that's leveraging the costs that we normally are trying to get from the government, and we're saying, let's figure it out together. Let's come together and how can we put our funds or our ideas or the access or our social capital together in order to reach certain spaces that aren't typically there. And that's a huge thing. And then lastly, as I said before, and we'll continue to talk about this, is really all about taking risks. If you do not take the risk, you never know what you can accomplish. If you don't step out of the box and say, I'm going to try that anyway, or I'm going to use my idea and apply for this application with this idea anyway, you'll never know if you could be that success. And we have people in this room who stepped out on their own faith, on their own intuition, and said, I'm going to do something different because I believe my idea is big, it matters. And not only that, we've had folks who have gone through the legal system, criminal legal justice system as young people, and they use that experience to say, I know what I would have liked if I was that kid and I was receiving those services. I know how I can make it better. We need to be listening to those folks too. They have a different insight that some of us will never have. So it's really important that we take the time to listen, collaborate, partner, take away egos, and just focus on solution, which at the end of the day is about our kids. That's the only people that really, really matter at the end of the day. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jed.
Surprise, it's me. Thank you so much for that, Danique. Thank you for that, Danique. I am not Jed, but I am going to take us through a brief timeline, a whirlwind timeline of our work in establishing, I'm shorter than everyone else, our work in establishing this partnership and the community advisory body, the ZYC advisory board, as well as what the process looks like. and then I'll take us through rounds 1 and 2, and I will turn it over to Jed for round 3 after that. But first, I just wanted to add on to something that Danique said about taking risks, because I think it's really powerful and really important that we examine what that actually means. Because I think that probably most people in this room know that the real risk is in the status quo. The real risk is to keep doing things the way we've been doing them, to keep punishing and incarcerating our babies and having them cycle through the system and having them get lifelong trauma from cycling through the system. What we are already doing is not working, and I think probably preaching to the choir, but everybody here knows that. So I think that it's important when we think about the word risk to unpack that concept and to think about the fact that what we're doing already is a liability. What we're doing already is a risk. And so in taking these small opportunities with these small amounts of money to reimagine and be innovative and experimental, I don't think that's the real risk at all. So to take us through our first steps in putting this whole thing together, this doesn't go back far enough, but this actually all started in July of 2021. Mark Martins was there, not to call you out, but definitely we are indebted to your work for this. And I will be honest, when the county first approached us with the idea of working with them on something like this, I said to myself, so you want us to work with the county, who to me is the people that are incarcerating and detaining our babies, on doing less of that? That doesn't make much sense to me. And so I had that moment and that lack of trust, because I think that, as David said, there are perverse incentives here. But at the same time, I respected the individuals that came to us and our individual relationships with them and the dream that they were sharing with us to do something different with a small amount of money. And I think that the partnership that we have formed is really beautiful, and I also think that it's really important that the distinct organizations that are in it, because it really is a checks and balances situation where we hold each other accountable. The Milwaukee Turners are able to advocate for the community is able to hold us accountable and advocate for themselves and for the answers that they know of through the forums and through the advisory board. And so we're kind of all able to work together in this really unique way to push things forward. So originally, in the beginning, it was a lot of trust building. We established a community advisory body, the ZYC Advisory Board. I'm looking out at a lot of you who have served on that, and I'm very grateful to you for that. The advisory board was made up of a lot of folks who have been working on youth justice for a long time, as well as folks who are directly impacted, whether that was as a young person or as an adult. And then we also have hosted a series of community forums to establish the principles for the initiative. One of those was held in this building last year. They were both virtual and in person. And we also used that information and the community priorities to create a framework for the application process. I have never been a person who was giving out grants before, and so a big part of what I think we all did was we thought about what we hate about the grant application process and tried to do things differently, or as differently as possible. I certainly know that there's a lot of red tape, a lot of forms to fill out, especially if you're trying to get money from the government, and you might get an Excel spreadsheet that has 50 tabs and be completely unsure how to fill that out. So we've really been trying to cut that all down. And I'm sure that there is more that we can do to be innovative in the grant process, but those were some of our original goals with that. So in round 1, we had 4 virtual forums because we were still kind of coming out of COVID, and we really weren't sure who would show up. And it was folks from the system, folks that were already working in the community, folks that were directly impacted, folks that were just random community members who were interested because they understand that the future of our young people is all of our young people, and it affects all of Milwaukee. And so in round 2, we hosted 2 virtual forums and 2 in person, one here and one at America's Black Holocaust Museum, as well as one youth-led forum where young people came up with the questions and they moderated their own circles, and they ran their own feedback. And that was really incredible. That was hosted at Your Move Milwaukee, which was one of our round 1 grantees. Another really important component of this is that for each round, we have made visits to Val Phillips Detention Center to talk directly to the young people who are currently detained in there. And I think that's a really critical and really powerful part of this process in speaking to the people who are directly impacted. And I will say on a personal note that I'm sure lots of you have talked to the kids in there. They are smart, they are kind, they are funny, and they know what the system is doing to them. And they can say that, they can name that out loud. So when we are putting people through these cycles of trauma, those people are very aware what is happening to them. And so their feedback is absolutely important in this process and very critical. And so in rounds 1 and round 2, we took all of the information from the forums, we shared the community's priorities for funding, and we shared that with all of the potential applicants so that they can use that to inform their own programming. So round 1, some themes that really came out were the participatory budgeting piece that we were trying to organize around and work towards, the fact that this was a really experimental process. It had not been done before. This was a unique partnership, and then building trust. In round 2, we continued ZYC work, but this time with ARPA dollars, despite rising corrections costs. So that did cause some changes in the process for us on the back end, and I say that because I think it's important. A lot of times when you apply for grants, there's a lack of transparency on the funder side, and being somebody who comes from being funded, I think it's really important that we name that and that we be transparent about that and about funding sources. In round 2, we also really focused on the systems change piece, and we asked folks to apply with a systems change lens, even if there were folks that were doing direct service work. And we know that direct service work is so important, and that folks who are doing direct service in the community are doing a lot of things and filling a lot of needs that maybe the government is not doing, or that that society is not providing for people. And so that work is super important, but it just wasn't the focus of this grant, since there's a lot more dollars that are available for that, and they also have the opportunity to have contracts with the county, for example. So we focused on the systems change piece, which we'll also talk about is a continued focus in round 3. And then we had a much stronger focus on youth participation in round 2, like I mentioned, the youth-led forums, and we will also be continuing our focus on that youth input in round 3. So in round 1, we had 30 applicants. Round 2, we were proud to have 36, so a couple more. Looking forward to your round 3 applications. Bless you. But I think as we've seen a lot of the changes and a lot of the building of this process, that gives me a lot of hope for our new focuses and our new expansion in round 3. And so I've taken up so much time, but with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jed to talk more about round 3.
Yeah, so getting into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do for round 3, we're very lucky. We're very lucky that the county doubled their investment into this work, as did the Public Welfare Foundation, to commit to doubling the total amount of dollars that we'll be funding for round 3. So one of the big pieces for the first part is to continue supporting innovative community-driven solutions to limit the impact of the criminal legal system. And then it's also to build capacity among local community organizations to understand the current landscape around youth justice for their work and advocate for transformative change in youth justice and decarceration. So breaking down how we intend to use the $800,000. Again, this is informed not just suddenly and out of the blue, but there's been two plus years of working with community, talking with community, listening to community, and informing our processes, as Chrissy alluded to. So half of the dollars, we will continue to do the RFP process, which you'll get a timeline on in a couple moments from Danique in terms of when that'll be distributed to the community and what you might do to be able to apply for that, because that'll open up relatively soon. And those will go to 2 to 3 youth-serving organizations. You know, I don't want to put a specific dollar amount on any of the particular grants, but you could probably do the math about an estimate of what those grants might be. The other half of the dollars are going to go to supporting the Turners to build up and facilitate a space for 10 to 15 community-based organizations working to dismantle the youth incarceration system within Milwaukee County. Those organizations have not been determined. You'll get a little bit more information about what that community table is going to look like in a couple of moments and how to hear more about that. Really what we're trying to do is we're trying to double down on our not only our available resources, but also our approaches. Chrissy talked a lot about the systems change aspect of that, and we recognize that through the first couple of rounds that maybe us as the facilitators of these resources didn't do the best job of really saying, what is systems change? How do we get to systems change? How do we build the political education around systems change when what we're really talking about is how do we decarcerate young people? How do we keep communities safe? And how do we advance transformative ideas that don't rely on punitive systems, right? And so we recognize that, and we through conversations with partners, through entities in the communities, we thought this is what needs to happen through this process is simultaneously to the ongoing RFP that will go out to the community, we will build this table. We will do the political education, whether it's the organizing training, understanding what the issues specifically are within youth justice, what are policies and processes and practices that impact young people in our community that are specific to Milwaukee, that this was a way to enable that. And also to push back against all the negative, racist, super predator mythology that we get through our news outlets about black young people within Milwaukee and Milwaukee County. So there's going to be a part of this that's also about the narrative change pieces that we think has been missing and that we've heard from community over the last couple of years. You know, there really needs to be a pushback on that narrative. And so those are the big pieces of what's about to happen through round 3. And you'll get, at the end of this, you'll get some more information about timelines around the release and what's to come next. With that, I'll turn it over to the Turners to talk a little bit more in depth about the community table. And it's just coffee.
So one of the things we've learned over the course of these few years, through conversations with all of you, through meetings with all of you, through learning from what you're already doing, is that there's a major need to develop a strong collaborative and collective advocacy space led by us. In this space, we hope trust can be earned, issues prioritized, and we can develop strategies that we can use to go forward collectively. Also coordinating our efforts, not just for direct service, but for systems change and policy work. While no single organization can change the youth justice landscape on its own, a coalition of these organizations whose mission is to ensure that young people should not have to face incarceration or any of the different long-lasting and generational traumas we've discussed, we believe that this is a space where we can alter policy, practice, and the lives of those who are most impacted. Lastly, we recognize the importance of a narrative strategy that addresses how young people are described in Milwaukee, as Jed was saying, and push back against these narratives. Part of this investment, the $400,000 investment in the community table, will be administered by the Milwaukee Turners, and we'll subgrant that to additional organizations as needed. We will happily host and facilitate the table and create this collaborative process, build trust among organizations to promote aligned systems, to change efforts, and provide and broker training and technical assistance and opportunities for all of those organizations that are participating in this movement. If you're interested in being selected to become a community organization partnering in this effort in the next few months, we have a QR code in the back near my friend. And you scan that, and all that information on how to apply is there, and we can take a look at this. That is important. That is how you can keep in contact with us so that we know that you're interested in this process. Now I'm going to bounce over to Danique, who's going to discuss some of the key dates and resources.
All right, some information for you all to pay attention to, key dates and resources. The RFP application release date will be Friday, November 8th. The submission deadline is going to be Friday, December 20th. And we are going to be working on sending out those award notifications February of 2025. So if you want to take a picture of this information really quickly, so you have those dates plugged in. And then also want to point your attention to the back of the room at the back table. We do have the round 3 RFP one-pager that gives more details and information for you to take with you. He's holding it back up there if you guys want to just glance. And then we also have the round 3 scoring rubric. Now this is something new and different. As you know, we want to make sure that we're always transparent in everything that we're doing. And this allows you to have a better understanding of what is being asked of you when you're thinking about your applications. Obviously, you still have to do those things, right? Anything you put in your application, you should be doing. Not just saying we're going to do it, but we actually need to do it. And then, of course, there's community table interest form, as talked about earlier. And then there's a QR code that's available for folks to scan for the information as well. And then now I'm going to turn it over to Emilio and/or David for questions.
One quick little thing, the scoring rubric is not yet completed yet. That'll be out shortly.
There's a lot of civic engagement lessons that we want to make sure that folks are getting through this process. We're encouraging critique and asking people to be as imaginative as possible to think about what would be best to help prevent a young person from going deeper into the system. Consider what they would need, consider how you would implement that, but we also want, with the community table, folks to really look at this as a way for some power sharing in this process. And oftentimes when we deal with funding and philanthropy, people are afraid to say what's really on their mind because they're afraid that it's going to be something that penalizes them in the future and shuts down other opportunities. We want to challenge that with this process. And at the same time, we also know that, I see some of the partners here from the CVI space. I see people from the reentry space in here. There's a lot of issues that are going on in our community that are very siloed based upon funding and things like that. The more education we can do on these issues, the more we can get to the root cause of many of the same problems that we're all trying to tackle in separate ways. So there's a host of educational opportunities for the community with the community table. So it's a big part of this, obviously, with this cycle. Let's go into the Q questions.
Yeah, so right now, we are completely open for questions. My friend in the back, with the awesome glasses touching your shoulder.
So Paradigm Shift, and I know that they're represented tonight, Your Move MKE were funded, I think in the first round, if I'm correct. And I'd probably say one of the best stories of this whole project and this effort was how they were able to find a shared program location. The Norris Center is also there with Achieve MKE. And effectively, they opened up a whole new space for young people as an outreach center for engagement and programming in collaboration with each other. Both Paradigm Shift, both of the people that run that, Shannon Ross and Adam Procell, people with lived experience, formerly incarcerated persons who have, a lot that they do in the way of advocacy to work with that population, in addition to Your Move MKE working heavily with youth, with hip-hop chess clubs and other programming. So it's both prevention and then on the back end of a young person having been involved. So that was one of the success stories we saw with that. I don't know if you want to add on more, Emilio, to that question. And I do want to shout out Pathfinders, who is also awarded in the second round Paradigm Shift did receive it 2 years in a row. And this is a commitment to capacity building. A lot of these folks had not necessarily done it to this level or received funding at this level. And sometimes, let's just be honest, we're in Milwaukee, this is the city with the most nonprofits. Sometimes folks will give you money just to see you fail and then you never return to try and ask for it again. This was an opportunity to learn fast, course correct in certain aspects, push back on red tape and things that were, like you mentioned, 50 tabs, and I jokingly said, hey, it's not 50, it's only 30 on the budget spreadsheet, but all of the obstacles attached to it. So it is a learning opportunity, is a capacity building opportunity. People will not be penalized for it, but it does have to serve young people.
Perfect. Okay. My friend.
So there's a lot that we could say in response to that. I would say the biggest thing is you have to be committed to the systems change effort. It cannot be law enforcement adjacent, meaning that, and when we say law enforcement adjacent, we mean that there's any type of encouragement of deeper system involvement, investigative type stuff, mapping of the bad kids, not, the good kids type stuff. No demonizing, all right? But it is transformative work. It does recognize needs. It can be behavioral health. It can be arts. It can be an intervention based upon behavior, or it could be something that builds their cultural and social efficacy, that they can advocate for themselves, build leadership. It can run the spectrum there, and even those are too limiting to what it could be. Did I miss anything?
There is a de-emphasis on direct services and a
Thank you for saying
re-emphasis on advocacy, policy, systems change. Everybody knows the adage of, oh, the baby was floating down the river and these people were saving the baby. This is more, and this is a small investment to what is confronting a Goliath of a problem.
Why are kids ending up in the river?
Why are kids ending up in the river? How do we prevent that whole process that is putting kids in the river?
Right.
So that takes a deep shift for us.
So, what about people that, because we have a lot of community, I'll preface this by saying there are community people that really want to make a change, right? And there's some great ideas within the community. What about those people who haven't had established organizations or established LLCs or businesses, but they have a great idea and could potentially want to use this funding to help build that process out? Are those people encouraged to apply in that way and emphasize this is how we're going to set up our model in addition to policy changes, system impact, all these different things that we're looking for, how do we encourage them? Is there a lane, let me say that. Is there a lane for them to be able to apply? Because, we all meet different people that have great ideas, but there could be a collective of people that may need to come together and may have to form, a formal business or whatever. And do you have to have that okay, I need a...
Like infrastructure?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So probably the most effective way for that to be navigated, and it has been addressed in each of the previous years, is for you all who have those ideas to meet and connect with the other people that are here to do just that, to build a coalition, to work with other people that have established a model for effectively delivering on those types of services. Because we're working with foundations, we're working with all sorts of federal laws about how you can give money and what the procedures are for making sure that that money didn't just go and buy me a new Tesla somewhere. And making sure that everything is above board. Not to say that an individual who's creating an idea isn't, but they can easily connect with other individuals to help do that coalition, work with a group that they already have an established relationship that they trust with to be their fiscal partner, to be a steward. Also, to some of that technical difficulty that you and David had both addressed earlier, the Milwaukee Turners also help to serve as somebody that is communicating directly with the county and helping to create and tool a process for this ongoing relationship so that you don't have to suddenly get a crash course in how to do Excel spreadsheets and audits and figure out what all those things are.
So the applying organization has to be a C3. So it has to be a formal entity, 501c3. It does not mean that the partners within that work or that project or whatever all have to be C3s, but the groups that apply have to be C3s. So,
And a C3 is a registered nonprofit. My friend.
So if, thank you for the carrots too. So if we're housed in the Dominican Center, Amani United, we have a lot of these groups, we have our Amani group and council. I am a hub within inside the Dominican Center as well, I have Spark of Divinity. So if they are physical agents, and because we have a couple of new ideas from younger people of how they want to see their future go, can be applied, as long as you just said it was 501c3.
That is a perfect example of a syncretic and symbiotic relationship whose works are also already known, and we celebrate Dominican and Amani, where that seems like a natural way it's a perfect example. And also the fact that you have elevated, say, working with young people to help author those ideas, those closest to the problems are closest to the solutions and often farthest from the resources. Working with Pathfinders, who also did similar things to tool the model that they applied using the young people that were involved in that program and process, is the best way to get an answer.
Well, we're looking to increase more. We do the National Night Sleep Out. November 21st is coming up. Sleep outside to bring more awareness to homeless youth. And our youth actually spend the night out in vacant lots. Not only just in Amani, but throughout the city, just so that they can understand the thought of being homeless, how it affects you. When you go back home to lay in your bed and use your facilities, reminding them of these different importance and also survival skills. We're all one paycheck aware, 1 year paycheck for being homeless, but also with these young people, how they were saying, so how can I make sure that that doesn't happen to me, and if I am homeless, how can I survive without being trafficked, without being assaulted in the middle of the night from a person, raccoon, animal, just going through those different processes. And they came up with a lot of great ideas, and we're gonna be implementing those in 2025. But we need the extra money, like even for our tents, having them do the tents all around the lot.
Figuring out how to take those types of tactics and activities and connecting that to whatever any of you envision advocacy and systems change and policy look like is definitely vital ingredients, important things to learn and put in the recipe. I saw some other, my friend?
So, you mentioned 501c3, what about 503bs that are nonprofits as well? So is it just specific 501c3?
I'd have to look into that. I'm not aware of what that technical marcation is. I know the C4s, which are not eligible for this because they're just doing lobbying. I'd have to look into that. And I'll share my contact information later with anybody that has that specific question. Friend?
As the funders, can you give like a thesis statement of the specific things you're wanting to accomplish through round 3?
I think succinct.
None of us are known for being succinct.
Yeah, I was like, I know we have it written down. We can
They're all
freestyle
laughing
it. I mean, I'll just say that, you know that there's an award, at least $400,000, that's going to go to agencies that are going to help build capacity and leadership and advocacy around the issue among young people at highest risk or who have been impacted. Then the other $400,000, obviously, for the community table, the 15 representative body that will help guide this process, but not only guide the process, but will host forums to educate the community, and will also come forward with facilitating public dialogue and discourse on this issue. So certainly awareness, policy and advocacy change efforts, and then empowering those most impacted by this in a way that boosts their efficacy and also increases prevention of them going deeper into the system.
A lot, and thank you. And I have no disagreement with any of that. I have only agreement. But also creating collective strategy. There are many brilliant, talented people, some of you who have done this work generationally. And it's huge. Just financially speaking, knowing that it costs so many hundreds of thousands of dollars, soon to be approximately $2,000 a day to incarcerate a child per day, the solution must be born collectively. A strategy must come collectively because the system itself, the status quo itself, is wrong, is broken.
In the back.
Friend in the back. So it's a complicated question to unpack. At Turner Hall, we have gymnasium, the concert hall, all these different events, and we keep us safe. And so knowing that Pathfinders, all of these different people have places where their staff keep them safe and make sure a whole litany of community norms and rules are protected, that the visitors, the patrons, the children, the adults, we have children activities all the time. I don't need law enforcement in that building for that case. You may have your own internal security, your own staff that's trained in these things, counselors. That's great. That's not necessarily law enforcement adjacent. Part of our reckoning at the Milwaukee Turners is the Milwaukee Police Department, for a specific example, is already eating up 44% of our city budget. I don't need to give them more money.
And I would also just, we have better ways to cope funding for that type of service and support. That round is actually opening up shortly with another round. And I just want to encourage you to look at that. I hear a clinical model that's needed. I mean, we know that we've advocated with CYFS for, opioid, programmatic, kind of things so that we can address that, because it overlaps. And that's the point that I was making earlier about we fund for this and it becomes very narrow in the focus and not recognize the complex needs that folks present with. So I just encourage you to continue to consider that. And, there's a difference between having a secure setting versus having an increased police budget.
Friend in the front, friend in the back.
I'm just gonna say over here. Can an organization, both apply for the community grant and be part of the community sector?
That's the breakdown.
That's one of the things I missed. So the groups that get the RFP, they're going to be a part of the community table as well. So it's going to be one of the requirements of being part of the RFP. So regardless of who wins that award, they will be part of the community table.
There was a person back there first. As the executive director of a nonprofit, I don't even know what fully staffed means. In 3.5 years, we've gone from 3 to 50 staff people, and that's still not addressing all the things I need. So, don't worry about it. Also, to tag on to something that Jed was mentioning, and connected to something David said earlier, one of the ongoing blessings that was indicated from the previous awarding with Paradigm Shift, with Your Move Milwaukee, with Pathfinders, is the ongoing development of strategies and abilities to grow upon the base level of those earlier investments so that we can continue to figure out solutions to locking up our babies. And this collective knowledge sharing and strategizing has helped us expand what we do and how we do through the R&D of an initial program, through the continued connections that they make through the doors unlocked with the county, with nonprofits, with the government, with funders, so that this effort grows. We can see that magnified exponentially by this type of table. My friend from Amani Center had a question or statement.
Yeah, so one of the questions was about the complete table. I already know we're gonna flush, but you're gonna be sitting a lot of me. How often will you be reporting now? Will we come together as a collective?
A lot of that is TBD still. So the finer details of what this looked like are still being hammered out.
I'm going to rush coming in online. Thank you for the folks that are tuning in from online and putting a lot of great questions in there. I also just briefly wanted to provide a little bit more context about the community table and the next steps for the RFP. So we will have a specific RFP info session where once the RFP is released, then you'll have the opportunity to go through page by page with us, go over the RFP and ask your really nitty-gritty detailed questions. If you've applied in the past, you've been to one of those, that I believe is probably going to be all virtual. We will also be collecting the questions that were submitted tonight, both in person and online, and publishing those in an FAQ document that's updated regularly so that everyone has access to the same information. I know that there's some questions that were coming in from online that we'll have in there as well, so that way y'all all know all the same answers to all the same questions. And then for the community table piece, we will be announcing the details of how often it meets, how to get on it, what that process looks like in, it was on there, but I believe it's February 2025. There might be some information coming out a little earlier in 2025. And then we did have one question from online. We need positive behavior incentive solutions. Is there opportunities to allocate funding to the community table for incentives? The funding for the community table versus for the grants RFP process is set. However, on the note of positive behavior incentive solutions, I will say, or I will shout out that a group that's doing similar work to this already with ZYC funding is Pathfinders is making direct payments to young people for their work with their own ZYC group. And that's something that we're definitely really proud that they're able to do with this funding. A lot of funding, as I keep complaining about the grants process, is super restrictive, so you can't do something like get a space like Paradigm Shift and Your Move did, or do direct payments to young people like Pathfinders is doing. And so in terms of restrictions on how you spend the money for this, there are a few, but they are very few, and that does include the law enforcement adjacent piece. So that is to say that you cannot use the grant dollars to pay, for example, police to come in and speak to young people, or to pay what is effectively like a school resource officer to come in and do a circle with young people. You wouldn't be able to use money towards that. More questions? Yes. Okay, so the question is, do all organizations need to be a 501c3, including for the community table?
Probably undetermined, but there will be some grants, so.
Okay. Yeah, so just to repeat what Jed said, that's probably not fully determined yet, but there will be sub-grants. So while the Turners is holding the money for the community table, there will be sub-grants to organizations and potentially individuals working on the community table, but we'll have more details about that in the beginning of 2025. That's a great question, though. Yes?
This might be somewhat related
Yes, that's a good question. And so the 501c3 and the 501c4 work can be done by the same organization, but the funding for the C3, but this funding can only go for the C3 work. So for those that don't necessarily know the difference, C4 is usually political advocacy, lobbying, those types of activities where I go to an elected official and I say, hey, listen, I need you to do this thing. What's happening here is incorrect. And so most foundations won't fund that type of work. It gets far more complicated. But the advocacy and policy and systems change work can be done. I have to go lobby from time to time. That does not come from any of my grant or foundation work. Although I still do that thing, it is unconnected to that because those are just two of many different tools in my tool belt to see effective systems change. So excellent question. And these are very complicated questions, and they'll be answered, some of them in the FAQ. When we go through the RFP, you'll have some time to digest what we've just spent an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about and have other refined questions. There was a question over here and a question over here, my friend. Yes, with a wonderful necklace. So this isn't a matching grant, and that's a good question. Some groups are newer and start up if there's no requirement for how much you need in the bank or what you need to do. And so it all depends on the merits of the strategy and the program that you're proposing. There was a question over here I saw it on my peripheral. My friend in red? Right.
But in the hospital, it made me feel kind of like a jail because of the secure measures, like a lot of communities in treatment while they're going under treatment. Keep themselves safe and like but it's nothing to do with law.
Absolutely. Thank you. My friend. Yes. My friend.
Hi. So my question is, I know you spoke briefly on like the opioids and the propensity of how it all kind of works together in some instances. Would this grant particularly be something that can be used in helping as a prevention, or would that be something separate with one of the subs?
So the county very generously offers the Better Ways, the BWTC grants. And so those are specifically for recovery and prevention and other things. That is a really good, and we have also received that way for us to do recovery services, programming, and other activities specifically geared towards helping people recover from substance abuse or preventing it. We have Narcan machines, public health machines. We do a lot of trainings on these types of things in addition to the other work. This grant, the Zero Youth Corrections Youth Opportunity Grant, is to address primarily preventing young people from being incarcerated. If a subsection of the program you're proposing is addressing opioid or substance abuse, and it makes sense in the capacity of changing advocacy and policy that is getting youth incarcerated, then by all means. There's no prohibition to do that. But primarily, there are other bigger pots that would address specifically for that, and that's probably a better target. Oh, I'm sorry. My other friend. It's a complicated question. You can't buy me gifts. No. That'll come out more with the RFP. Their general, you want to answer that one?
He saw me creeping forward eagerly. No, and that also ties into another question that we received online. This will be in the RFP, but the primary restrictions are like regular IRS restrictions on what a 501c3 can and can't do. So you cannot spend the money on lobbying, And then the law enforcement restriction is our own. It's a law enforcement and government funding restriction, just because we don't believe fundamentally that we need to put more money into those systems. They have their own money, they have enough money, and so that's just not the work that we'd like to fund with this very limited pot. But in general, it's not totally unrestricted, but in general, it's very unrestricted compared to a lot of grants, and that's something that we're really proud of. And on that note, another question from online is there a minimum amount of time that a 501c3 has to have been in service? For example, can it be a recently created 501c3? And the answer to that is that there is not a minimum, and that's also something that we're proud of about this grant. A lot of grants that you apply for say, oh, you have to have 3 years of proving that you have been so good and have all these documents. And so I think that that is another thing that we're glad to remove the red tape on. Any more questions?
Part of that process is why the Milwaukee Turners are involved, to serve as a firewall and a buffer, so that the opportunity for those of you that have been doing this work for so long can invest in your own research and development to see what we need, because what we have is not working. Friend. Oh, yeah.
Is it recorded and available online?
Yes. Well, it will be available online. It is being recorded.
Yes, and we will email out the recording. If you signed in on the sign-in sheet or you registered online, we'll email out the recording and it'll be available on our website as well. So we'll use that list to reach out to you when we're launching the RFP and when the other documents are coming out, whether they're about the RFP and grant process or about the community table.
If there are no more questions, thank you all so very much for coming and investing your time in this. I encourage you to take the leftovers so they don't add it to the 20 pounds of candy I've eaten these past few days.